Well, like I alluded to just a minute ago, got a week this week, a week of weeks, as the oldest daughter is going to be, Lydia, is going to be graduating this week from high school. It's an exciting time, and we have been going backwards and looking at old pictures. That's what you do at milestones, right? You go backwards and you look at some cool pictures from back in the day. And we were looking at kindergarten pictures of Lydia when she was this big. Now, the funny thing about going back and looking at these kindergarten pictures, I had to make the statement the other day that these pictures, when we took these pictures, we did not have smartphones back then. Right, we didn't. Like they didn't exist at that moment. And even if they would have, we wouldn't have had them yet because we were late adopters to technology, usually, Meredith and I. So we didn't have those. So some of the pictures, I was able to tell the kids, and Meredith and I were reminiscing on it, that these pictures right here, when we were 4, 5, 6 years old, they came from what we call a disposable camera. Does anybody remember these things when they first came out, like in the late 80s, right? Right? Yeah, some of you all remember this, and those of you that are pretty much under 40 for sure, you're going to remember that, or over 40, I should say. Under 40, you might not know these, but I remember when they first came out when I was a little kid, and it was like, you throw them away? Like you don't keep the camera. Like you take the camera to Walmart. Everybody remember this? You remember this? It had 27 pictures. You all remember that? 27. I don't know why they picked 27. Why not 26? Why not 28? They picked 27. And it would have the little dash between on the odd numbers, and you never knew if you're on your last picture or not. Y'all remember that? Does anybody remember? Does anybody know what I'm talking about, right? Right. And you're like, oh, I got one more picture left, and you push the button and it doesn't take, and you're like, oh, that was 27. I thought I was on 26. Missed the opportunity. And if you're younger, you don't understand that anticipation of going back to Walmart to pick up your 27 pictures and not knowing if they're going to be good or not. We didn't even know what a selfie was back then, but we would try to hold it out, and take a picture, and you get it back, and it's like way over there, and you're like, oh, that's my ear and then the wall. And that one's no good. We'll throw that one out. But the thing about the throwaway camera, the disposable camera, whatever you want to call these things. I remember when I was little and I had to ask the question because I was a question asker. You can ask my mom and dad. I was like, well, how does this work? We take the box to Walmart and then they give the pictures back. How does this work? I don't understand this concept. And as they explained it to me, was they take the film and they go into a dark room. Go into a dark room. And there's a process that happens in this dark room where they have to use a controlled amount of light. And you can't use too much light. You can't have too much darkness. It's a nice balance. But you bring the film into this room and it takes time. It takes a process to get the picture right, the way that it's supposed to be. And then God's process, by the way, with us is very similar to this. He develops us in His dark room. God takes us, if we're willing to trust Him, into His dark room. And in His process, He brings restoration. The question is this today. Do you trust Him with your negatives? Do you trust God with the negative things that have happened to you or that you have done in your life, that He can restore them into something good? Do you trust that God can take the bad things that either happened to you or that you did in your life and He can find purpose and restore them to something good? I don't know about you, but I believe we all need restoration. We all need regeneration. We all need redemption. We all need salvation. So when I say restoration, here's the word I want you to think about. Healing. God is always, 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 always desiring to heal us and restore us. And not restore us back to where we were, to restore us to where He wants us to be. The question is, are you willing to submit to Him? Are you willing to trust Him with your negatives? Are you willing to pray this prayer? Psalm 51, verse 10, 11, 12, and 13. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. Do not banish me from your presence. And don't take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and make me willing to obey you. Then I will teach your ways to rebels, and they will turn. They will return. They will return. You will restore me, and then I will preach, and I will be a witness, and they will return back to you. That's the product of restoration, is a clean heart for you and a right spirit. But then the rebels, the ones that are turned away from him, are going to turn back to God. So restoration isn't always just for you. I want you to know a couple quick things about God's process of restoration. Number one, God's process of restoration requires time to develop. It requires time. Y'all remember back in Walmart, you didn't drop it off and come back that afternoon and get your pictures back, right? You had to wait a little time, about like a week or something. You come back on a certain date and pick your pictures up, right? God's process of restoration requires time. How much time, Pastor Justin? His time. How much time is that? Whatever he says. What am I supposed to do? Be patient. I got nothing else. That's it. That's the point. His time, your patience. That's how it works. Second thing, God's process of restoration comes with a promise. The process comes with a promise. Now, some of you are getting ready to say amen, but then you saw the word process. You're like, whoa. I just want the promise. I just want promise. I don't want process, right? Because process means I got to do something. And when it comes to God, when he's wanting to do something, he's wanting to grow me. So what you're getting ready to tell me to do something I don't want to do. I just want the promise. But then there's this third thing. God's process of restoration is where you're going to find favor and fruitfulness. So if you want favor in your life, if you want to see fruitfulness in your life, it comes in the process of restoration and you submitting your negatives to God and letting him do a work inside of you first so then he can do a work through you. So today, I want to look at a story in Genesis, one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament. A man who went through the process of restoration. The man's name is Joseph. You can actually go home and read it after this if you want to, Genesis 37 through 50. You can read the whole thing if you want to. But at the start, you're going to see something really interesting with Joseph. He received a promise via a dream. But there was a process before he could see the dream and the promise come to fruition. Restoration was the outcome that happened. And it sums up the entire reality. You can find it in Genesis 50:20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. However, there was a process. There was a process to get Joseph to that position. And the position was physical. Yes, he was in a position with a title, yes, with power. But there was also a spiritual position that he had to be in. He had to go through a process to be ready for that position. Let me give you the story in a quick synopsis. Joseph, the favorite of the 12 sons of Jacob. Why? Because he's got the same dad as all his brothers, but he has a different mother. His mother's Rachel, and if you guys know Jacob liked Rachel the most, right? So then Dad got Joseph a very nice coat or a robe. If you guys know the story, especially if you've been in Sunday school when you were growing up, right? He's in this special coat, this special robe. It's colorful, it's beautiful, and all this stuff. But guess what? You think his brother's like that? No, he's getting special treatment. That's ridiculous. We hate you and your coat. So Joseph, on top of having a special treatment with this coat, he gets the family together and he's like, guys, guess what? Not only am I the favorite out of all of you all, I've got a dream. 2 dreams, in fact. And they're like the same meaning to them. All of you are going to bow down and worship me. Isn't that great? I'm the chosen perfect one. My Father loves me more than all of you, and then all of you are going to bow down and worship me. Brothers are like, no, Jojo, we don't like that. We don't like you. One day Jacob asked Joseph, he says, go and you check on your brothers and the flocks, go check them out. They see him coming, and the brothers decide, you know what? I don't like his dreams. We don't like his coat. We don't like him at all. Let's just kill him. Let's get rid of him. Let's get this done real quick. But then the oldest brother, Reuben, got the idea. He's like, no. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw him in a pit instead, because after all, he is our brother. So let's just throw him in the pit. And in his mind, he's thinking, I'll come back later and I'll save him. But at least I can we won't have to kill him right now. But then as they're going to throw him in the pit, they throw him in the pit, and they're like, wait a minute, I got a better idea. Judah's like, no, let's sell him and we'll make some money. That's a better idea, because in the pit, we ain't going to get anything out of it. If we sell him, we get some money. So let's just sell him into slavery. So they sell Joseph into slavery. Reuben comes back a little bit later on. Joseph's gone, but he understands he's held responsible because he's the oldest brother. So they're going to kind of cover up the lie of what happened. So the older brothers come up with this. The other brothers come up with an idea. Here's what we do: we'll rip up his coat, we'll dip it in some blood, and we'll show it to Jacob, and we'll say he was eaten by a wild beast. And that's what they do. So Joseph now has been sold into slavery. He's taken to Egypt. The Egyptian officer Potiphar, if you guys know the story, he actually is working for Potiphar, and he's doing great things. God is with him. It says the Lord is with him, and all of the affairs that he's touching are working out really, really well. Speaking of affairs, Potiphar's wife wants some JoJo, but JoJo says no. But in a serious note, notice when you read this, in a moment where he could have been very upset about his situation, he does not compromise. If you read more in the Scripture, you're going to find out that when it comes to temptation and lust, you will read that we are to flee, or AKA run from it. Well, that's what he does. He runs. She's begging him. She's begging Joseph, come sleep with me. And he runs, but he leaves his coat behind. She takes the coat, accuses Joseph of raping her. Potiphar gets him arrested, throws him into prison, where the king's prisoners are all confined up. But again, the Lord is with Joseph. Favor is with him. The keeper of the prison notices it. He ends up letting Joseph run the entire prison. There's these two servants in there of the king. They get thrown into jail. It's the butler and the baker. They end up in the prison right next to him. One night, they both had these dreams. Joseph says, hey, just tell me the dream. I'll ask God. He'll interpret it for me. I'll give you the interpretation. He tells the butler, I got what yours is. You're going to be restored. He tells the baker, bad news. You're going to die. And that's exactly what happens. But Joseph tells the butler, when you leave, remember me. Remember me. And go tell Pharaoh, I'm in here and I shouldn't be in here. But the butler forgets. 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream. Nobody can interpret it. But the butler then remembers, wait a minute, there was this dude in the jail. He can do this. He tells Pharaoh. Pharaoh calls for Joseph. Come on in here, interpret this dream. And then God gives him the interpretation for Pharaoh. He says, hey, listen, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have 7 years of plenty. You're going to have 7 years of famine. And Joseph gives him a plan. Pharaoh responds. He's excited. He's like, man, this is awesome, Joseph. I'm going to put you in second, it's like right underneath me, my right hand, second in command over all of Egypt. So he went from the pit to Potiphar, to the prison, to the palace. Here's my point. There's always a process to the palace. There's always a process to the palace. And the process is restoration. And here's the thing, don't forget this. If you try to shortcut the process, you'll short circuit the product. The product will not be what God intended it to be if you put your hand on it and try to cut corners. God's plan is listen, God's plan for you always has a process. It's your decision if you want to walk in the process or not. God's process brings security, hope, destiny, growth, and maturity. Do you need any of these today? It's found in God's process of restoration. Now, I want to pause for a minute. I want to show you a few lessons that we can learn from Joseph, the restoration process that Joseph walked in. Number one, there's pain in the process. There's pain in the process. Just a news flash to you, if you follow Jesus, or you might decide to follow Jesus today, just because you're a follower of Jesus does not make you immune to pain. It does not make you immune to hardship. It does not make you immune to trials. In fact, Jesus said you're going to have many trials in this world. But take heart, though. Ooh, take courage. I have overcome the world. That's why we trust in the Lord. But there's 3 pains that you can see here. Number 1, the pain of the pit. The pain of the pit. What's that? It's the pain of the past. Let me ask you a question today. Have you been hurt in your past? Have you been physically hurt? Has someone physically abused you in your past? Has someone emotionally abused you in your past? Maybe you were a kid. Maybe you were a teenager. Maybe you were an adult. But like Joseph, if you've ever found this out, that sometimes the people that hurt you the most are the people that are closest to you. Don't allow the pain that others have caused you to keep you stuck in a pit. Don't allow the pain that others have caused you to keep you stuck in a pit. What's the pit? The pit can be a place in your mind, a place where wounds are, a place where nobody can see those wounds, but you feel those wounds. And in that pit, you will entertain bitterness. You will entertain unforgiveness. You will entertain unrighteous anger towards somebody. In the pit, if you stay in the pit, it will affect the way that you see things. It will affect your perspective. It will affect the way you see God. It will affect the way you see others. It'll affect the way you see circumstances. And it will certainly affect the way you see yourself. And sometimes we're the culprit of our own pain. Sometimes we dig our own pit and then we jump in it. Proverbs 26:27, whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and he who rolls a stone will have it roll back on him. Sometimes we're the only ones to blame for the pain that happens in our lives. Here's the good news. God can restore you. God can forgive you, but you must first forgive yourself. Stop trying to fix yourself. Stop trying to get out of the pit by yourself. You need God to restore you. Don't allow the pain of your past to keep you in a pit. The second pain is the pain of Potiphar's house. What's that? It's the pain of the unexpected. I mean, think about it. He's getting out of the pit, which you would be like, woo, this is good. I'm out of the pit. I don't want to be in the pit. That's not cool, right? Things are going to get better, aren't they? Aren't they going to get better? Well, then it gets worse. He's falsely accused. He goes from a pit to the prison. He gets absolutely blindsided. Question, have you ever been absolutely blindsided? Have you ever lost a job and you didn't see it coming? Have you ever lost a loved one and you didn't see it coming? Have you ever had a marriage problem happen and you didn't even see it coming? Have you ever felt like you just can't catch a break? Have you ever had a situation, it seems like it's bad, but it keeps getting worse? Joseph felt this. You and I will have seasons like this when life doesn't make sense and the hits seem to keep on coming. But the challenge to you and the challenge to me is for us to be like Joseph. And don't blame God. Don't walk away from God. Joseph kept his integrity. He didn't compromise. We may not understand everything. We may not have all the answers, but we got to trust God's plan and trust the process. The third pain is the pain of the prison. The pain of the prison. What's this pain? It's the pain of despair or the pain of hopelessness. Look at all that he's been through at this point. He's been betrayed, sold to slavery, used, abused, falsely accused. I would just say he's broken. He's broken. And maybe that's how you feel right now. Maybe you walked in here today and you feel broken, like you have no hope. There's despair, there's disappointment. But listen, you may be broken, but it's not over. Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, 8, 9, but we have this treasure in earthly vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us. We are hard-pressed on every side, not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. And see, this verse reveals the power of perspective. What's that? Listen, God is more concerned about doing something in you than He is about doing something for you. And sometimes God will allow us to go through some things so that we can grow and we can mature, and then He will get the glory for it. It doesn't mean that God brings bad things to us in our life. No, sometimes things just happen because there's evil in this world. However, God sees you as an overcomer. Romans 8:37. Yet in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loves us. Point number 2. Yes, there is pain in the process, but number 2, there's purpose in the process. There's purpose in the process of restoration. Now, that word can be a little bit misleading, purpose. Now, notice I didn't say on purpose. Because I've heard this said, I've heard people preach this and teach this story before and say, God threw Joseph in the pit on purpose. Go back and read it. Did God throw him in the pit? Who threw him in the pit? His brothers threw him in the pit. God didn't throw him in there, right? But God can use it. See, not everything that happens to you is because God planned it. God's plan doesn't always happen. You have free will, I have free will. You can choose to follow God's plan, or you can choose to follow your plan. You have to also understand you might be trying to follow God's plan, but somebody else might not be wanting to follow God's plan. And there's some things we just can't explain, and some things we can actually point to an enemy. There's an enemy who very much dislikes you. He wants to kill your confidence, steal your security, and destroy your dream. And listen, if you don't know God, I'm not talking about know God up here, but if you don't know God, gnosko is the Greek word. If you don't know Him intimately, you will not trust Him when things go bad in your life. Psalm 119:68, you are good and you do good. Teach me your statutes. You're good. I know you're good, God, and I know you do good, but I don't know everything about you, but I trust that you're good. Now I need to learn. So you teach me. I want to not just know you here, I want to know you here. And see, when you trust God, listen, it only will happen to trust God is when you get to know His heart and who He is. And you'll know when you get close to God and your theology gets a little bit deeper, that God finds purpose in any circumstance. Even in the worst circumstance, God can find purpose in it. See, Joseph stayed with the process and he got the product. So not everything wrong in your life is God's fault or done by Him at all. However, if you allow Him, He'll find purpose out of the things that are causing you pain and causing you shame, but you have to trust Him and trust His process and have 50-20 vision. Has anybody got 50-20 vision? Anybody in here got 50-20 vision? I don't see any hands. So you need 50-20 vision. What is that? I'll read it to you again. Genesis 50:20. You intended it to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. Do you have 50-20 vision? That God can take the worst thing that could happen to me and use it for good. Don't let your context change your character. You got to pre-decide before something bad happens, that if it's bad, God did not bring that to me, but God can use it. No one or no circumstance is going to fundamentally change my faith. That's a pre-decision you have to make. That no matter what the circumstances that happen in my life, it will not change my faith in God. One thing you can notice about Joseph, he had integrity and ambition. They could take his coat, but they could not take his character. Listen, don't let ugly make you ugly. Don't let mean make you mean. Don't let nasty make you nasty. Don't let angry make you angry. Don't let jealous make you jealous. Don't let bitter make you bitter. Don't let greedy make you greedy. You got to pre-decide that I'm going to trust God and I'm going to be constant in my character. Don't let what happened hinder you from helping. Don't let what happened hinder you from helping. See, when you help somebody else, you sow a seed that reaps an unexpected harvest. Let me say it to you this way. Whenever God gives you an opportunity to bless, you have an obligation to help. Whenever God gives you an opportunity to bless somebody else, you then have the obligation to help somebody else. You will bless some people. Listen, you're going to bless some people. If you follow God, you're going to bless some people that will never thank you. You're going to bless some people, if you follow God, who will never bless you back. If you follow God, you're going to bless some people that will never repay you, never say thank you, kick you while you're down, even though you've done nothing but bless them. Talk about you behind their back, even though you've done nothing but bless them. But listen, they are not the source of your harvests. I can tell you this right now. I've had people that I thought were on my team, I thought were my friends, stab me in the back, talk about me, whatever. I just continue to bless them. It's totally fine. I'm not going to gossip about them. They're going to gossip about me. That's totally fine. You know why I do that? Because I know who the God of the harvest is in my harvest. He's my source, not them. And that's fine. I'll release them to God, and they're going to have to face Him anyways. I'm just going to keep on trusting Him. I have an obligation to help people. If He opens up a door for me to bless somebody, I'm just going to bless somebody else and just keep on moving on. Galatians 6 and 9, everybody, listen. Let us not grow weary in doing good, because in due season you will reap a harvest. Also, don't forget this. Don't let what you're going through govern your gift. Notice, Joseph used his gift in the palace and prison. Let me say it again. I don't think you got it. He used the gift that he had, not just in the palace, but he used it in the prison. So he's broken and he's faithful at the same time. He's not broken and having a pity party, going, I'm in this prison. I know I have this gifting. I will not use it, because it's not going to benefit me to interpret their dream. So I'm just going to sit back with my arms closed. I'm in prison. It's not fair that I'm in prison. Why would God put me here? I thought I had a dream. They're all going to bow down to me. What is going on? Listen, if he didn't use his gift in the prison, the butler wouldn't have known about his gift. And then he wouldn't have had a trip to Pharaoh. Let me say it this way. Don't disrespect your gift because you don't like your situation. Don't disrespect the gift that God gave you just because you don't like the circumstance that you're standing in. I don't know how many times, way back when I was a brand new Christian, I would just do whatever somebody asked me to do. I don't care. Hey, Justin, will you pick up trash? Sure, I don't care. Hey, you go do this? Yep, sure, I don't care. Stack up chairs? I don't care. Whatever you want me to do. I'll do whatever it is that you want me to do. And how many times, as I'm doing these little tiny things they're really insignificant to me at the time, I'm learning, I'm in process. God is growing me and showing me things that I needed to know in that time. You could look at it like, I'm in prison. Like, no, I'm in a process, right? Just know you're always in process if you're following God. He's taking you from one level to another level, season to season, glory to glory, right? You're never going to get there, right? I'll just go wherever He calls me, wherever there is. God, just lead me, right? Don't disrespect your gift because you don't like your situation. And the third thing, and the most important thing that I see from Joseph's restoration process, his presence is in the process. Whose presence? God's presence is in the process. Genesis 39, 2 and 3. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did. Did it say, because Joseph was so smart, he succeeded in everything that he did? The Lord was with Joseph. He succeeded in everything that he did. Right? A little further on. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. So he's witnessing. He doesn't even realize he's witnessing to somebody else. Right? Scoot down a few verses. So he took Joseph and threw him into prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love, and the Lord made Joseph a favorite. God did that with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Who caused it? It wasn't Joseph. See, God is with us, and he's with you, not just in the good times, not just when things are prospering. We see the Lord was with Joseph in the pit when he was betrayed, when he was in slavery, when he was facing extreme temptation, when he was facing being falsely accused. So I came here to tell somebody this morning that God is with you. He is with you in your despair. He's with you in your shame. He's with you in your addiction. He's with you in your anger. He's with you in your bitterness. He sees your pain. And he wants you to know. He wants you to know. He wants you to know there's purpose in all of it. And he can bring good out of it. Because he'll never leave you and he'll never forsake you. You can read that in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. The psalmist wrote in Psalm 139, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you're there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand will lead me and your right hand shall hold me. Everywhere that I go, God, you are there. Your presence is with me. If I acknowledge your presence. Don't let your problems cause a perplexity about God's presence. Don't let your problems cause a perplexity about God's presence. What do I mean? Don't let your pain cause you to doubt if God is actually there with you in the middle of the pain. Listen, if you know God is with you, you can say this phrase. It's going to get better. If you know God is with you, you can declare this phrase. It has to get better. If you know the all-powerful, loving, graceful God is on your side and he is walking with you, you can declare over any circumstance, it has to get better. And a mature Christian can say these two words in any situation. I don't care what the situation is. The worst situation that you can imagine. A mature follower of Jesus can say these two words. You can list out the situation. You can list out how bad it is. And you can say these two words. But God. Even though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, but God will be with me. Even though it seems like my world is falling apart, but God said he'll never leave me and he'll never forsake me. Even though it seems like everybody is against me, but God is for me. So then therefore, who can be against me? Some of you today, somebody in here today needs to adopt these two words and say, yeah, I know this is happening, but God. I know this happened to me last week, But God. I know this happened to me when I was a kid. But God. Now let me kind of wrap it up with this. I told you guys earlier, the whole story's in Genesis 37 through 50. If you go to Genesis 37, don't go there right now. If you go home and you go to it, Joseph is 17 years old. 17. And God gives him this dream, which then puts him in a pit. So be careful if you want God to speak to you. You know, you might, I'm just kidding. Not really, but it could happen, you know. But God, at 17 years old, gives him this dream. And then he's in process. 20 years later, Genesis 45, his brothers walk in. He is now second in command. Check this out. I love this. Then he broke down and wept. Now I'm going to come back to this. Okay, so just make a note. I'm going to come back in just a second. He wept so loudly, the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless. They're stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Please come closer, he said to them. Come here. So they came closer. And he said again, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery. And I'd be like, uh-oh. We getting ready to die. He said, but don't be upset. And don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. Don't get mad at what you did. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. So in this moment, check this out. Joseph has the power to punish them. He remembers what they did. It wasn't like he forgot. He remembers, but he doesn't retaliate. He remembers the bad that they did, and he didn't retaliate. Some of you still ain't getting it. He remembered they were going to kill him. Does it get any worse than that? Your own family is trying to murder you. He remembers, oh yeah, I know you guys were going to kill me. But he's not going to retaliate. Why? Why? Here it is. Joseph's love is greater than his memory. Joseph's love is greater than his memory. And this is why God chose Joseph instead of all the other brothers. Because of his radical love, his radical forgiveness, his radical extension of grace. Here's the point. To receive the promises of God, it requires the giving of grace. To receive the promises of God, it requires you to have radical giving of grace that you have received from a God who is crazy in love with you. Listen, are you still waiting for God to fulfill a promise He's shown to you? Maybe it's because you are not giving out the grace that He's given to you. There are times when common sense says, retaliate. There are times when common sense says, hurt them. Hurt them back. Hurt them worse than they hurt you. There's times when common sense says, slander them. Talk about them. Gossip about them. They deserve it. But love always says, forgive them. Extend mercy to them. Give them grace. Let me ask you 4 quick questions. I'm going to stop. Do you have the strength to allow good to come out of you when bad has been done to you? Does it take strength to do that? Today, do you have the strength to allow good to come out of you when bad has been done to you? Second thing, when bad has been done to you, Do you seek revenge or reconciliation? Right now, think of somebody who's done something bad to you in your own brain. Do you seek revenge or reconciliation? What we see in Joseph is that your heart has to be bigger than your head. The third thing is, do you have the grace to accommodate people who change? What do I mean by that? I want a news flash for you. God restores people. And somebody maybe who did something in your past, maybe they've been redeemed. Maybe they're going through a process of restoration. They're not who they were. Do you have enough grace to extend out the same restoration and grace and love and forgiveness and mercy that God has given you, that maybe they've changed? People grow. People mature. Do you want to see them grow, or are you just going to hold a grudge? Last question. Do you have the strength to survive a fall? What do I mean by that? Have you ever had that dream? Have you ever had a dream where you're like falling? You know what I'm talking about? And you woke up like it was real. Like you were like, ah! Like, I don't know about you, but when I've had that dream before and I'm falling, I feel powerless. Out of control. I can't stop what's happening, and it's very nerve-wracking, right? The only answer when you have a fallout, when something bad happens, it could be a relationship, it can be someone that did something to you that you didn't see coming, it can be anything. When the fall happens, and it's going to happen, and you feel out of control, do you have the strength to say, I'm just going to trust God in the middle of this? That even though it feels like I'm out of control, He is in control. And I'm going to trust that no matter what's happening to me, He's going to bring good out of this bad. Now, let me close with this. I'm going to close this time. This is the third time I've said it. Third time's a charm. There were points in the process. If you're Joseph, think about when he's 17 years old, gets thrown in a pit. There's points in the process where it did not appear that this dream that God had given him is actually going to happen, right? Can you track through those years? There's multiple times, years, where God had given him a dream at the start, and years are going by, and bad things are happening where he could go, I guess this is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. How did he stay focused? How did Joseph stay focused? And this is a word for somebody today. Joseph was not following the dream. He was following and trusting God. Some of you here today are following a dream instead of following Jesus, right? And what happens, it's a process. So when God reveals something to you, it's not the end, it's not the final product yet. It's the first draft, right? You might even be on the second draft, but He ain't done yet when you're in process. He's not going to show you everything. It takes faith to follow Him. Stop following some dream that He showed you, just one little part of it. Follow Him. How do you do that? You do the last thing He told you to do, and you just keep doing that. Keep serving Him. Keep loving Him. And expect that He's going to tell you what to do next. And here's what happens. Here's what I found. This is in my own life. The more I follow Jesus and not a dream, the dream follows me. Do you know that? I've told some of you all this. God showed me a vision over a decade ago. I kind of forgot about it, but you can't really forget about it when God speaks to you. He showed me something. It was so vivid, color, everything. It was just kind of a snapshot. I didn't know what it meant, but I was excited. It was a place. There were people there. And I was preaching at the time. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even want to preach. I don't want a microphone. I just want to play the guitar and put up chairs. That's all I want to do. Like, just let me do that. But in that moment, He showed me this picture one Sunday after church. I was praying and just came to the altar. I was having a moment, and God showed me this picture. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. Over a decade later, the Sunday after we came out of the 7-week lockdown with COVID, it was Mother's Day weekend, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago to this date. I came up here, turned this corner, and I looked up, and it was the exact same vision. It was boom, just like that. Just like that. Just like that. I'm telling y'all, color and everything, it was just boom. And all those things that God had spoken to me a little bit here and there, and just keep trusting me, keep following me, keep serving me. I never worried about that dream. I figured if he showed it to me, it's going to come to fruition someday. I don't know how. And many times I think about it and be like, that ain't never going to happen. Not with me, right? But here we are. And look what the Lord has done. Amen? Right? And I only share that with you all just so you can trust that when God shows you something, he is going to fulfill it. His promises never return void. His word always comes back, and it always proves him right every single time. So let me come to this last part. You got to hear this. So Joseph weeps, right? I don't know about you, but I've always read that, and I'm like, why is he crying? Why is he weeping in that moment when his brothers walk in? Because I think you can read that and you can think, well, that's a negative thing because he's crying. Like, that's not good. So he's upset, he's sad, he's whatever. Here's what I'll say. I believe those are very happy tears. Why? Because then it goes on and says that he kisses and hugs his brothers, so he's happy. There's happy tears. But why is he crying? Why is he crying? Here's what I say. Because he realizes the dream that was given to him 20 years ago is happening right now. He realizes that what they did to him didn't stop God from doing what he said he was going to do. Woo! Oh. And when you realize that when God says he's going to do something, he'll do it, you realize nothing can stop God. Nothing can stop him. You can't even stop him. No one can stop him. And so some of you here today, there's somebody here today who needs to hear this. God spoke something to you some time ago. I don't know if it was months ago or a year ago or whatever. Here's what he's trying to say to you today. It shall come to pass. It shall come to pass. You might have had some setbacks. Maybe you weren't ready for it yet. Maybe you need to grow a little bit. But there's a new season today that you're walking into. A season of answered prayers where God might bring some tears to you, but the tears are going to be happy tears because you're going to see him fulfill what he said he was going to do. And you're going to realize that my God is a God who answers prayers. And God will show me something, and he will answer that. And he will bring it to fruition. Because that's who my God is. These tears aren't sad tears. They're victory tears. They're triumph tears. And you can stand up and say, no matter what happens to me, I'm going to trust him in everything that ever happens. It doesn't matter. The worst of the worst can happen to me. I will trust him. The question is this. Will you allow God to work with your negatives? Will you allow God to work with your negatives? The things that you've done or the things that someone else did to you and your family. Will you allow God to work with your negatives? Will you trust him to bring good out of the horrible? Will you trust him?